Hi everyone, today's video is going to be my build video for the 2A HD Cats LGBTQ Pride or Pride Support Challenge 2023. The car you're currently seeing is the one that I built for a previous entry, which was based off the eBay Mustang that eBay sponsored to be built for the London Pride March. I can't remember the year, it was a long ago. Sadly I have no idea what happened to the car. I presume it was probably resold and then ended up in someone's private collection, possibly even converted back to factory. So initially it wasn't my intention to do another Mustang for this, but when I was digging through the castings that I had, I ended up pulling this one out, which is a Mustang, which is a Matchbox No.44 Boss Mustang. Originally I thought it was something like a Plymouth, just because it doesn't really look that much like a Mustang to me. So this casting's clearly had a rough life and been kit painted and such, and is in much need of a makeover. Not too sure if it's in need of a gaslands makeover, but that's what it's going to get, because that's all I built. So, but yeah, I like the idea of, with the exposed engine, putting a double supercharger on this, and then the rest of it just kind of worked its way from there. So I disassembled the car, and here's all the bits and pieces. I'm sure it's missing a hood, but again, it was kit played with, so it was probably damaged long ago and lost. So the first thing I did is drop the interior piece into some bleach to remove the chrome, which ironically is something 2A HD Cats taught me. Sadly it doesn't remove all the chrome because obviously it's got paint and some other gunk on it that I'd put on it over the years, but it removes most of the chrome. So the next phase was the wheel swap. So for this I just got some styrene tubes to use as new axles and glue them to the base plate. For the rear wheels I'm using some Kyamsil Designs 18mm fatties, tyre design 10, rim design 7. So use a piece of styrene rod as part of the new axle and glue it to the back of the wheel. I do exactly the same for the front wheels, except I use some Kyamsil Design 10mm dual wheels, tyre design 10, rim design 5. So next I retrieve the interior from the bleach and then move on to building up the engines. So I remove the zoomies at the top here with some sprue cutters. I then sand it down with the files, just so when I super glue the new supercharger on top, it'll have a better surface to bond to. So I glue on this new Kyamsil Design supercharger, followed by a Kyamsil Design air scoop. So since the car's raised, I wanted to add some suspension, and for this I'm just going to use some screws, because once you paint them up they do look apart like suspension components. Here you can just see I'm test fitting everything, making sure everything looks right. I use some larger screws for the rear suspension. And again I test fit this again, make sure everything fits together and nothing's rubbing or catching, because that's the last thing you want to do is when you build this whole thing up and then got to put it back together at the end, and you've got to destroy half your work to get everything to fit together again. So as you can kind of see, there's quite the gap in the wheel well, and I plan to fill this up with some styrene panels, which I'll just cut off camera. Here I glue them in place again, just making sure everything lines up. Do the same for the front. As you can kind of see, there's quite a bit of a gap here and I need to fix this. So I just do this off camera because it's a case of adding pieces, cutting them down, trimming them, and then taking them out and just constantly back and forth, and it's just a nightmare to record, so I just do it off camera. And here's the finished result. So next is to fix the supercharger belt, which you saw was broken when I installed it. So for this I just cut off the old one, and then just take some small square styrene rod and just bend it into shape and glue it over the top. And as you can see, it looks the part. So next I'm going to add the driver, which is a 172 scale World War II British soldier. I just buy a lot of these 172 scale World War II figures because they're cheaper and easier to get hold of than the Gasland ones. I do a little quick test fit and he doesn't fit, so I remove the steering wheel and just keep test fitting. Obviously you have to remove his legs like you usually do. I don't know why I have to remove all the tray of his legs. One of these days I'll probably build a car where I don't have to cut the guy's legs off to fit him in there, but it just is it is. So after some back and forth, cutting some bits off the figure, cutting some bits off of the interior, I'm eventually able to get him in there. Next I use my pin drill to drill a hole into the roof because I'm going to add a machine gun here with a gunner. For the gunner I use a 172 scale French World War II soldier just to change it up a bit. So I noticed the seat here is going to cause problems because I still wanted to be able to rotate left and right, so I just removed the top section of the rear seat and just cut it off with my sprue cutters. So then test fit the gun and the gunner just to make sure everything can move around freely, and then glue the gunner to the minigun. The minigun is from the North Star Military Figures Implements of Carnage sprue. Moving on to the painting, initially I did want to remove the paint from this using a white oil brush because I don't usually use chemicals to strip paint because I work indoors and so I don't want the hazard of the chemicals. But after hitting this car with a wire brush for a bit, all I was able to do was remove the gunk off of it. So since this doesn't really work and the vehicle is going to be post-apocalyptic anyway, I just set the paint over it. So I start with a base white, just a sort of primer, because I'm going to be painting a lot of light colours over the top, and obviously you don't really want to paint light colours over dark colours that are already on the body. Next I paint the chassis, which I use Revell rust for. And then paint the tyres with some Revell matte black. So next I make a start on the pride colours. Now to start I use a purple colour which I just mixed up with some random colours that I had lying around because I didn't have an actual purple. I then use some fiery red on the other side. So after this I use some Revell bronze, which is technically a brown but it looks very like orange, and I usually use it for my rust. And then use some Revell light blue for the other stripe. After this I use some Revell Fern green, and then lastly I use some Revell Lufthansa yellow for the last stripe. For the interior I just use some Revell stone grey. For the engine and the exhaust I use Revell metallic steel. Back to the wheels I use some Revell rust for the hubs, followed by a wash of Revell bronze. I also use some of the Lufthansa yellow to paint the shocks, as well as some of the purple to paint the driver and the gunner's uniforms to match the vehicle. I then use some Revell flesh to paint the driver and gunner's skin. And then dry brush on some Revell metallic steel onto some parts like the bumpers and such and the minigun, just to kind of give it that rusty look. Not fully completely rusted away, but just to show that rust is kind of bleeding through. And after this I just did some odd bits and pieces like the headlights and such, just some touch-up pieces here and there, before I finish the whole thing off with a nice black wash that just brings everything together. And here we have the final build, which I feel turned out quite well. So this was a very simple build because I stuck to the 3 Bs of Gaslands, which is big gun, big motor and big wheels. Something I coined myself, I just thought it was funny. As usual, I hope you enjoyed the video and stick around for the glamour shots as well as the short little animation. And I'll see you all in the next one.
Incoming buzzards.